While you were watching XRP drift lower on the one-day chart, three things happened this week that most people in this space completely ignored. Morgan Stanley filed for a crypto-focused national trust bank with the OCC. 11 Senate Democrats formally demanded a DOJ and Treasury investigation into Binance, the largest crypto exchange on the planet. And the stablecoin yield deal that Washington promised would be done by March, it just collapsed behind closed doors. Three events, three different categories, and all three of them are pointing at the exact same conclusion, one that the mainstream financial press is not connecting for you. The signal is clear, but only for those who are actually looking. Let's pull back the curtain. Welcome back to Common Sense Crypto. I'm Rich, and this channel exists for one reason: to give you the calm, rational, data-driven analysis that cuts through the noise in this space. No moon boy fantasy, no panic, just the structure underneath the surface, because that's where the real story always lives. Today we are decoding what these three events tell us about exactly where XRP is headed, and why the math, not the emotion, should be guiding every decision you make right now. Let's jump in. Let me start with the hard truth. Most people watching XRP right now are focused entirely on the wrong thing. They're staring at a price chart. They're watching candles. They're asking whether we're going to get a green March or another red month. They're calculating what percentage they're down from the all-time high. That's the surface. That's the noise. What I want you to understand today is the architecture that is being constructed underneath that surface. Because when this thing moves, and it will move, the people who only watch the chart are going to have absolutely no idea why it happened, and they're going to be buying halfway up a green candle, wondering why they weren't ready. Here's the concept you need to understand. There are two phases in the life cycle of any new financial infrastructure. Phase 1 is construction. Phase 2 is ignition. During construction, the people building don't announce every brick they lay. They don't send press releases every time a rail gets connected. They sign agreements. They file applications. They position. Quietly. Deliberately. That is what we have been living through with Ripple and XRP for the better part of a decade. Now here's where this week gets fascinating. We just got three simultaneous signals that suggest, and I'm going to be very precise with this word, suggest that Phase 1 is entering its final stage. Signal 1. Morgan Stanley filing for a crypto-focused national trust bank with the OCC. This is not a retail bank deciding to offer a Bitcoin ETF. This is Wall Street's oldest and most storied investment bank filing for a completely new chartered entity specifically designed to handle digital asset custody at institutional scale. They are not testing the water. They are building the infrastructure to hold what they believe is coming. Signal 2. Senate Democrats formally demanding an investigation into Binance over alleged Iran-linked financial flows and violation of its 2023 compliance settlement. Now, I know people are going to split on this politically, but set the politics aside entirely, because what this tells us about the market structure is critical. When the world's largest crypto exchange by volume becomes the subject of a bipartisan federal probe, it accelerates one inevitable outcome. Regulated, compliant, US-licensed entities become the only safe harbor for institutional capital. That is a lane that XRP and Ripple have been building toward, through years of litigation, compliance infrastructure, and banking relationships for a very long time. Signal 3. The stablecoin yield bill collapse. The White House wanted a deal done before March. It didn't happen. The crypto and banking lobbies are still far apart on yield. And here's the thing that people are missing. This matters for XRP specifically. Because the delay in stablecoin regulation does not delay on-demand liquidity, it does not delay the settlement rails that Ripple has been building across Japan, the EU, the UK, and the MENA region. In fact, every week that stablecoin regulatory clarity gets pushed out is another week that XRP-based liquidity solutions hold a structural advantage in corridors where stablecoins can't yet operate compliantly. Think about what that means. The alternative just got pushed back. Again. Let's do the math, because this is where the conversation usually stops being about opinion and starts being about reality. We have a fixed supply of 100 billion XRP. That is not changing. Of that, approximately 55 to 57 billion are currently in circulation. Ripple's escrow releases roughly 1 billion per month, but consistently relocks the vast majority of that. The actual net release into circulation has been declining. Exchange reserve data from CryptoQuant shows XRP on centralized exchanges has been trending toward multi-year lows. That is coins leaving exchanges. That is the structural definition of accumulation. Now let's talk about the market that XRP is designed to serve. Cross-border payments. The primary stated use case for XRP through ODL represent approximately $150 trillion annually. That is, the volume of value moving across borders every year in the form of wire transfers, correspondent banking flows, and remittances. The Nostro Vostro system, the pre-funded account system that banks currently use to facilitate those transfers, has approximately $27 trillion locked in idle capital around the world at any given moment. That money isn't moving. It's sitting in accounts in foreign currencies, waiting to be used as a liquidity buffer. XRP was designed to replace that buffer. That is the use case, not speculation. Settlement. Now here's the math that retail investors consistently ignore. If XRP is going to serve as a bridge currency for even a small fraction of that $150 trillion annual flow, you have to ask what price is required for the system to function efficiently. Think about it this way. Higher price per XRP means fewer tokens are needed per transaction, which means less slippage, less market impact, and more viable high-value transfers. The math doesn't work at low prices for high-value institutional settlement. It works at high prices. That is not a moonboy fantasy. It is a design requirement. Brad Garlinghouse, CEO of Ripple, said something this week that most people listened to and heard encouragement. What I heard was a technical confirmation. He said there is not one switch. There are 100 switches. There are 1,000 switches. And those switches have been flipping bit by bit, corridor by corridor, partnership by partnership, for over a decade. He's right. And he's telling you something specific. He is not describing speculation. He is describing infrastructure completion. Every ODL corridor that goes live is a switch. Every regulatory license in a new jurisdiction is a switch. Every bank that moves from testing phase to live deployment on RippleNet is a switch. And when enough switches flip simultaneously, what happens to a circuit? It powers on. Not gradually, all at once. That is not a prediction. That is how electrical infrastructure works. And it is how financial infrastructure works. If XRP captures just 5% of the annual cross-border payment flow that needs bridge liquidity, just 5% of a $150 trillion market, you are talking about $7.5 trillion in annual throughput that needs to settle through an asset with 55 to 57 billion liquid tokens. Run that math yourself. Ask yourself what price that implies. And that is a conservative scenario. Now let's look at what the institutions are actually doing. Because if you want to understand where this is going, you don't watch what they say. You watch where they move their money and their legal infrastructure. Morgan Stanley filing for a crypto national trust bank is not a headline. It is a strategic signal. Ask yourself this brutal question. Does a firm managing over $1.3 trillion in client assets move its legal and regulatory infrastructure into a new charter without absolute conviction about what is coming? They do not gamble. Morgan Stanley has compliance teams, legal teams, and risk departments that take months to approve a single filing. This was not impulsive. This was calculated positioning. Ripple itself, over the past 12 months, has made moves that have been underreported to a remarkable degree. The acquisition of Hidden Road, a prime brokerage platform, gave Ripple direct infrastructure to serve institutional clients who need custody, clearing, and credit facilities. That is not a crypto company building hype. That is a financial infrastructure company building for the institutions that are coming. And those institutions are now filing their own charters to receive what Ripple will deliver. And then there's Japan. This is the one that doesn't get nearly enough attention in English language crypto media. The Japan Financial Services Agency, the FSA, has been working with SBI Holdings, a major Ripple investor and partner, to expand XRP-based remittance corridors throughout Southeast Asia. SBI Remit processes hundreds of thousands of transactions per month. These are not test transactions. These are live, recurring, real money settlements happening today using XRP as the bridge asset. The EU is moving toward Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation, MiCA. The UK's FCA has been clearing the runway for digital asset service providers. And in the United States, The Digital Asset Clarity Act is in drafting stages. What do all of these have in common? They create the legal frameworks inside which XRP can operate without the shadow of regulatory ambiguity that has suppressed institutional participation for years. Let me say that again more clearly. Institutional investors do not have the discretion to invest in assets with unresolved regulatory status. It is not about fear, it is about fiduciary obligation. When the SEC's case against Ripple was partially resolved, when the court ruled that XRP is not a security in programmatic sales, that was not just a legal win, that was a fiduciary gate opening. Money that could not legally flow in began to flow. Now with the stablecoin bill stalling, with Morgan Stanley filing for a trust charter, with Binance under probe, regulated compliant infrastructure becomes more valuable, not less. And XRP sits inside that regulated infrastructure. While retail investors are watching the one-week chart and complaining about red candles, the architects of the next financial system are signing NDAs, filing charters, and building custody solutions. That is the contrast you need to hold in your mind right now. Let's talk about what is coming in the next 60 to 90 days, because I want to be specific without being reckless. March and April are when we typically see institutional quarterly positioning. After 5 consecutive red months, the data shows this is a historically rare streak. Only 2018 and 2019 produced anything comparable. The mean reversion pressure is building. That does not mean I'm telling you XRP goes up on a specific date. What I'm saying is the statistical backdrop for a reversal is present, and the structural backdrop is stronger than it has been at any prior reversal point. The stablecoin legislation, even delayed, is now on a clock. Congressional sources indicate language is circulating. The Coinbase banking lobby standoff over yield will resolve, either through compromise or through one side stepping back. When it resolves, every piece of downstream legislation, including market structure clarity that benefits XRP directly, moves forward on its timeline. The Binance investigation, regardless of its outcome, is compressing the institutional playing field. Regulated players win when unregulated players face scrutiny. Ripple is regulated. RippleNet operates under compliance frameworks in every jurisdiction it touches. This is a structural tailwind that most people are not pricing in. And the Morgan Stanley OCC filing, typically the approval timeline for a national trust bank charter runs 6 to 12 months from application. File that away. Because when Morgan Stanley's crypto custody entity is operational, the assets it will be mandated to hold as a national trust bank will need to have regulatory clarity. XRP has regulatory clarity. That is not a coincidence. The fuse is lit. The question is not whether it burns. The question is whether you are positioned before it reaches the end. I want to address something I hear constantly in this community. People say, I only have X amount of XRP. Is it worth it? Is that enough? Let me be very direct. The frame of enough XRP is a frame designed by people who have not done the math on supply. Here is what the math actually says. There are approximately 5.6 million XRP wallet addresses on the XRPL. The world has 8 billion people. If you are holding XRP, any amount, you are in a group that is statistically smaller than the percentage of people who owned Amazon equity in 2001. The argument that you need 46,000 XRP to matter is based on today's price denominator. It is the wrong frame entirely. The right frame is, at what price does your current stack change your financial situation materially? Run that number for yourself. Because I can tell you with certainty that the people who said you needed 1,000 shares of Apple to make it in 1998 were wrong about the frame, not the asset. Exchange reserves are draining. The window for accumulation at these prices is a window, not a permanent opening. When XRP breaks into sustained price discovery above its prior all-time high, the dynamic changes completely. The people buying then will not be the people watching this video now. The people watching this video now are the ones who had the information and the composure to act before the crowd arrived. Buy what you can afford. Dollar cost average. Do not speculate with money you cannot afford to lose. But do not let the noise convince you that where we are right now is anywhere other than early. I want to take a moment and say something directly to the people who have been holding through this drawdown. 5 red months. Watching people around you sell at losses. Being told by coworkers and family members that it's going to zero. watching the guy who bought at the top sell the second it dropped 15% and congratulate himself. You are not being irrational. You are being early. And in markets, early and wrong look identical until they don't. The data, the institutional moves, the regulatory construction, the corridor expansion, the on-chain flow, all of it is pointing in the same direction. The question was never if. The question has always been when. And the compounding evidence this week tells me that when is getting shorter, not longer. Stay patient, stay rational, stay positioned. Let's bring all of this together because I don't want anyone walking away from this video without a clear picture of what we just covered. We have Morgan Stanley filing for a crypto trust bank, institutional infrastructure being built in real time. We have the Binance investigation accelerating the regulatory premium on compliant, licensed entities, a premium that benefits Ripple and XRP directly. We have the stablecoin bill stalling in a way that does not delay XRP's utility, but does delay its primary competition in settlement corridors. And we have 5 consecutive red months creating a statistical baseline that historically precedes reversals. None of this guarantees a specific price on a specific date. I will never give you that. Anyone who does is selling you something. What this gives you is a rational framework for understanding that the architecture being built around XRP is not theoretical. It is contractual. It is regulatory. It is institutional. And it is happening now. Not in some distant future scenario, not in a speculative vision board, right now, in charter filings, in Senate letters, in corridor deployments across Japan and the EU. Brad Garlinghouse said there are 1,000 switches. Some have already flipped. More are flipping this month. And when enough of them flip simultaneously, the price movement will not wait for you to catch up. It will move before the mainstream media writes the headline. It will move before your coworker tells you it's safe to buy. It will move before the people who sold at a loss come back and ask you how to get back in. History does not reward comfort. It rewards those who pay attention when the room is quiet. We are in the quiet room right now. If you made it to the end of this video, drop the word architect in the comments. I want to see who is actually paying attention to the structure and not just the surface. This is Common Sense Crypto. I'm Rich. Stay patient, stay rational, and as we always do here, we don't wait for the future. We plan for it. See you in the next one.